The first time she smashed through my ranch gate, I thought it had to be an accident. The second time I knew it wasn't. By the third time I was standing in the dust, holding a twisted steel hinge in one hand while my horses bolted across the pasture. And she looked me dead in the eyes through the windshield of her luxury white SUV, smiled and drove away like she just won something. That smile cost her more than she could ever imagine, because 6 weeks later, she hit the only gate on this road that refused to move. And everything she had built her reputation on came crashing down with the front end of her SUV. People think revenge is loud. Sometimes it's nothing more than patiently pouring concrete. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 43 years old, and my family has owned Walker Ranch outside Cedar Ridge, Texas for almost 90 years. My grandfather bought this land after returning from World War II. My father expanded it one pasture at a time, one handshake at a time. Every fence post on those 600 acres had a story behind it. Every oak tree reminded me of someone who had worked themselves to the bone so future generations could stand on this soil. After Dad passed away, I took over the ranch alone. People imagined ranch life was peaceful. Most days it was. My mornings started before sunrise. I'd feed the horses, check the cattle, repair fencing, inspect water tanks, and haul hay before most people in town had poured their first cup of coffee. It wasn't glamorous, it was honest. The ranch sat beside a paved county road that curved around the northern property line before climbing toward an upscale neighborhood called Silver Creek Estates. Silver Creek wasn't there when I was a kid. Back then it was open grazing land. Within 3 years, expensive houses replaced mesquite trees, stone entrance signs, decorative fountains, perfect sidewalks, an aggressive homeowners association. The developers had promised residents country living with luxury convenience. Apparently I was supposed to provide the country while staying invisible. At first we got along well enough. Some families bought eggs for me. Kids loved feeding the horses through the fence. I'd wave whenever someone slowed down to admire the ranch. Then the HOA elected a new president. Her name was Linda Mercer. She was in her mid-50s, always dressed like she was heading to a country club luncheon instead of a neighborhood meeting. Perfect blonde hair never seemed to move, oversized sunglasses covered half her face, and she drove a spotless white luxury SUV that somehow never had a speck of dust on it despite living next to ranch land. Everyone called her efficient. I called her relentless. It started with letters, chartified mail, friendly reminders, suggestions, requests, then demands. According to Linda, my cattle trailer was visually disruptive, my red barn was fading. The hay bales were unattractive. The smell of livestock reduced neighboring property values. Coyotes howled too loudly at night. Roosters crowed too early. Dust from my gravel road drifted toward HOA homes. She even complained that my windmill squeaked when the wind picked up. I laughed the first few times. Then I remembered something important. Silver Creek Estates ended exactly where my fence began. The HOA had absolutely no authority over Walker Ranch. I politely wrote back once. Thank you for your concerns. Walker Ranch is not part of Silver Creek Estates. Have a wonderful day. I thought that would end it. Instead, it became personal. One Saturday afternoon, I was repairing fencing near the main entrance when I heard tires crunching gravel behind me. Linda climbed out of her SUV wearing expensive riding boots that had clearly never touched mud. You Ethan Walker. I am. She looked around without introducing herself. This entrance is embarrassing. I blinked. Excuse me, our residents drive past this every day. I looked behind me. The ranch entrance was simple. A cedar arch with Walker Ranch burned into the wood. Black steel gates, fresh paint, flowering bluebonnets growing naturally along the fence. What exactly is embarrassing? The style. I couldn't tell if she was joking. It looks, she searched for the right word, cheap. My grandfather built it. She shrugged. Maybe it was acceptable 80 years ago. I leaned against the fence. What can I do for you? I'd like permission to redesign your entrance. I laughed. She didn't. I have an architect. No. It would improve neighborhood value. I don't care. Her smile disappeared. You should. My ranch isn't your neighborhood. She folded her arms. Everything around Silver Creek affects Silver Creek. No, my property affects my property. She stepped closer. You'll regret being difficult. I smiled. I've been called worse. She left without another word. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. About 2 weeks later, I noticed fresh tire tracks cutting across the edge of my pasture near the front gate. Not unusual. Delivery trucks occasionally turned around there. Except these tracks continued through my grass, straight toward an old maintenance road that connected back to the county highway. Someone had used my ranch as a shortcut. I installed a wildlife camera near the entrance. The next morning, I checked the footage. There she was, Linda. Her white SUV rolled through my open ranch gate at 7:42 a.m., crossed nearly 200 yards of private property, exited through an old service opening I'd left unlocked for feed deliveries, and saved herself maybe 3 minutes of driving. I watched the video twice, then 3 times. Surely she'd realized she'd crossed private land. I printed a screenshot. The following afternoon, I knocked on her front door. She answered with the same polished smile. Oh, she sounded disappointed. I think you accidentally drove across my ranch yesterday. As she glanced at the photo. Yes, I wanted to make sure it doesn't happen again. It will. I frowned.
I'm sorry. It's faster.
Linda, that's private across it, so you can't drive across it. She laughed. It's open. My front door is unlocked sometimes too. Don't compare your house to a road. It is now new. She handed the picture back. You ranch people always think you own everything. I literally own that land. She closed the door. I stood there for several seconds. That conversation replayed in my head all the way home. The next morning I chained the service gate shut. Problem solved. Or so I thought. 3 days later I was feeding cattle when I heard a metallic crash echo across the pasture. I dropped the feed bucket and jumped into my truck. By the time I reached the entrance, my main gate hung crooked. The chain had been ripped loose. Fresh white paint streaked the steel post. Linda's SUV sat on the other side. She rolled down her window. Your gate was locked. I had somewhere to be. You rammed my gate. You should have left it open. I stared at her. You damaged my property. She checked her watch. Send me a bill. Then she drove away. Just drove away. I photographed everything. Filed a sheriff's report. Deputy Mark Ellis arrived within an hour. He scratched his chin while looking over the damage. Know who did it. I showed him the wildlife camera footage. Then the fresh scrape marks. Then Linda's tire tracks, he sighed. I'll talk to her. She admitted it. I know. So she'll be charged? He hesitated. If she admits it officially, that answer didn't inspire confidence. 2 days later, he stopped by again. She says the gate swung into her vehicle. I stared at him. The gate I chained shut. I know. You've seen the video. I have. Also. He looked uncomfortable. Civil. Dispute. I couldn't believe it. She intentionally drove through my gate. I'm just telling you what the county attorney suggested. Linda knew exactly how to play the system. Damage just small enough to avoid immediate criminal action. Enough uncertainty to push everything into civil court. Enough arrogance to believe nobody would fight back. I repaired the gate myself. $300 in steel. 2 full days of welding. By Friday evening it looked brand new. Saturday morning, I found fresh tire tracks again. She hadn't gone through the gate this time. She'd driven around it, straight through my pasture, flattening a section of newly planted grass and leaving deep ruts that filled with water after an overnight storm. I checked the camera, same driver, same smug smile. I drove straight to the HOA office. Linda was leading a board meeting when I walked in carrying printed photographs. The room fell silent. I think these belong to your president. I spread the photos across the conference table. One board member adjusted his glasses. Another quietly whispered, that's not good. Linda didn't even look embarrassed. His exaggerating. I pointed at the images.
That's your sous vide.
So you've trespassed twice. No, I've used an access road. There is no access road. There should be. The board members exchanged nervous looks. An older man finally cleared his throat. Linda, did you actually drive across his ranch? She smiled without answering. That silence said everything. I looked around the room. I don't have a problem with any of you. I just want this to stop. For a moment, I thought someone might side with me. Instead, Linda leaned back in her chair and said the 7 words that changed everything. Prove you can stop me, Mr. Walker. I looked at her for a long moment, gathered my photographs, and walked out without another word. She thought she'd won. She had no idea that the solution wasn't going to involve another chain or another gate. It was going to involve something buried 4 feet into solid Texas concrete. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. This felt colder, more deliberate. I sat on my front porch watching lightning flicker across the distant Texas sky while replaying Linda's words over and over. Prove you can stop me. She wasn't just trespassing. She was challenging me. And the worst part was that she honestly believed she couldn't lose. By sunrise, I'd made 2 decisions. First, I wasn't going to confront her again. Second, every single thing I did from that moment forward would be completely legal. No yelling. No threats. No shortcuts if this ended in court, and I was starting to believe it would. I wanted every document, every receipt, every photograph, and every witness lined up before she even realized what was happening. I called my attorney, Sarah Collins. Sarah had represented ranchers and farmers across 3 counties for almost 20 years. She was in her early 50s with shoulder-length dark brown hair streaked with silver, calm hazel eyes, and the same navy blue blazer she seemed to wear to every meeting. She drove a dark gray Ford F-150 that usually had legal files scattered across the passenger seat. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. Finally, she asked one question. Have you told her not to enter your property multiple times? In writing? Yes. Do you have copies? Everyone. Good. Another pause. Install stronger protection. You mean another gate? No. What then? Something that protects your property without trapping anyone? I was thinking steel bollards. She actually laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. You don't think that's excessive? If they're installed entirely on your property, properly permitted, highly visible, painted with reflective markings, and positioned to protect your entrance. She let the sentence hang. Then they're protecting your property. Even if someone hits them. Only if someone illegally drives into them. That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I called the county engineering office. I expected red tape. Instead, the engineer surprised me. We've actually recommended bollards for ranch entrances after repeated vehicle damage. You have. They're common around utility sites and commercial properties. What do I need? He gave me a checklist. Property survey, utility clearance, permit inspection, exact setback requirements, reflective paint, warning markers, everything by the book. Perfect. Within 48 hours, surveyors were walking my property. The lead surveyor, Tom Hernandez, had weathered skin from 30 years in the Texas sun, a thick gray mustache, and a faded tan work shirt tucked into worn jeans. He drove an old white survey truck with orange safety flags fluttering from the back. He studied the entrance carefully. You've got someone driving through here. Repeatedly, he shook his head. Never underestimate entitled people. He spent most of the afternoon confirming every property line. When he finished, he handed me a folder. Nobody can argue where your land begins now. Exactly what I wanted. 3 days later, utility crews marked every underground line. The following Monday, county inspectors approved the installation. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. Meanwhile, Linda kept driving through every morning, every afternoon, sometimes twice a day. The wildlife cameras recorded everything. Different outfits, same SUV, same shortcut. Sometimes she even waved at the camera. She had become so comfortable breaking the law that she wasn't even hiding it anymore. I quietly added more cameras, one near the entrance, one overlooking the pasture, one facing the service road, one mounted inside the barn pointing toward the front fence. Each camera backed up automatically to cloud storage. If one disappeared, the footage survived. A week later, concrete trucks rolled onto Walker Ranch. The workers unloaded enormous steel pipes nearly 6 feet long and almost 8 inches thick. Each one weighed hundreds of pounds. My foreman, Miguel Alvarez, watched them unload. Miguel was 50, broad-shouldered, with short black hair peppered with gray, warm brown eyes, a faded denim work shirt, worn blue jeans, dusty brown work boots, and his favorite tan ranch hat. He'd worked beside my father for over 25 years. He whistled. "Those aren't fence. They're serious. They need to be." Miguel nodded once. "I'll get the auger." For 2 full days we dug 4-foot deep holes, rebar cages, concrete forms. Every measurement matched the engineer's plans. Every bollard sat well inside my property line, directly behind the legal entrance. Bright yellow reflective bands wrapped around each one. Additional reflective markers stood beside them. Solar-powered lights illuminated the entrance every night. Large signs appeared on both sides of the gate. Yo Turo UGH Tir Fi Hial Inurzade Via Chaos On LOA. Another sign ready Stale Cefida Bollards Ciade. You'd have to ignore every warning to reach them, which unfortunately was exactly what I expected Linda to do. The construction attracted attention. Neighbors slowed to watch, some rolled down their windows. One older rancher chuckled, planning for a tank invasion. "Just one SUV." He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. Word spread quickly through Cedar Ridge. By the weekend, everyone seemed to know someone was finally standing up to Silver Creek's OA. Some supported me. Others warned me. "That woman's connected. She knows county commissioners. She'll sue. She'll blame you." I heard every version. None of it changed my mind. Late Friday afternoon, something unexpected happened. 3 members of the HOA board showed up at the ranch. Not Linda. The older gentleman from the meeting introduced himself as Richard Owens. Richard was 68, tall and thin, with neatly combed white hair, pale blue eyes, a pressed light blue button-down shirt, khaki slacks, polished brown loafers, and a silver pickup parked by the gate. Beside him stood Denise Carter, early 60s, short auburn hair, green eyes, a cream cardigan over a floral blouse, dark slacks, comfortable walking shoes, arriving in a dark green crossover SUV. The third board member, Alan Pierce, was 55, clean shaven with sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, a white polo shirt tucked into jeans, brown work boots, and a black SUV. Richard removed his hat. "Mr. Walker, Ethan." He looked genuinely uncomfortable. "We wanted to apologize." I didn't say anything. Richard continued. "We weren't aware Linda had been using your ranch. You saw the photographs. We honestly thought there had to be another explanation. There wasn't." Denise sighed. "She's become me difficult." I almost smiled. "Difficult." Alan rubbed the back of his neck. "She's made decisions without board approval." Richard lowered his voice. "She's threatening residents now." That caught my attention. "What kind of threats?" "A fines." "For?" "Questioning her." I folded my arms. "So why are you here?" Richard looked toward the new Bollards. "Because she's not going to stop." "I know. She's telling people she'll simply drive through anyway." I nodded slowly. "That's her decision." Richard stared at the heavy steel posts. "Those real?" "Very." He swallowed. "I should probably warn her." "You should." He looked at me carefully. "Would you remove them if she apologized?" "No." "Why?" "Because they're not there for revenge." He glanced at the damaged gate leaning beside the barn. "They're there because she already showed me who she is." The board members left looking worried. For the first time since this whole mess began, I sensed cracks inside the HOA itself. Linda's power wasn't as solid as she'd pretended. The next Monday morning, Deputy Mark Ellis pulled into my driveway. He stepped out slowly. "I heard about the Bollards. You hear anything else?" "Linda filed a complaint." I laughed. "About what?" "She says you're creating a dangerous roadway obstruction." "It's not a roadway." "I know." He walked around the entrance, measured distances, photographed the warning signs, checked the permits, taped inside a waterproof box. "Fine, you've covered every base." I tried. He nodded. "If somebody hits these," he tapped one with his flashlight. The dull metallic sound echoed through the morning air. "They're gonna lose. That's the idea." He smiled for the first time in weeks. "I didn't say that." "I know." He climbed back into his cruiser. As he drove away, I noticed another white SUV parked 200 yards down the county road, watching. Linda. She never got out. She simply stared at the entrance for nearly 10 minutes before driving away. I wondered if she'd finally gotten the message. The answer arrived the following afternoon. One of my cameras recorded her stopping beside the warning sign. She stepped out of her SUV wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying a can of black spray paint. I watched from the barn through binoculars. She looked around. Then she walked directly to my largest warning sign. With quick, confident strokes, she painted over the word "Steel CF the Bollards ASE." Within seconds, the warning was almost unreadable. Then she climbed back into her SUV and left. I walked down to the entrance after she disappeared. The fresh paint was still dripping. I didn't clean it. Instead, I photographed it from every angle. Then I removed the memory card from the nearest camera and copied the footage onto 3 separate hard drives. Sarah watched the video later that evening. She smiled. Don't repair the sign. I wasn't planning to. Good. Why? Because if she ever claims she wasn't warned, she paused the video exactly where Linda was spray painting the sign. A jury is gonna love this. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. I wasn't chasing her anymore. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't reacting. I was simply letting her make choices. And every bad choice she made was quietly building the strongest legal case she'd ever seen. The only question left was whether she'd stop before running out of luck. Everything I knew about Linda Mercer told me she wouldn't. The answer came on a Thursday morning. It was just after 7:30 and the Texas sun had barely cleared the oak trees. I was repairing a water trough in the south pasture when my phone buzzed. One of my security cameras had detected motion at the front entrance. I wiped my hands, opened the live feed, and immediately recognized the white luxury SUV. Linda. She stopped just outside the gate. For nearly a full minute she sat there, staring at the entrance. The new warning sign, still covered with her own black spray paint, stood beside the road. The reflective markers glowed in the morning light. The steel bollards were impossible to miss. She climbed out of the SUV and walked toward the entrance. She looked around. Then, unbelievably, she kicked one of the bollards with the toe of her expensive riding boot. It didn't move. She frowned. She climbed back into the SUV. I had a bad feeling. Instead of turning around like any reasonable person would, she backed up nearly 100 feet onto the county road. My stomach tightened. No. The SUV stopped. Its brake lights flashed. Then she accelerated hard. Gravel exploded behind the tires. The SUV shot toward the entrance. She crossed the cattle guard, ignored the proper sign, ignored the reflective markers, ignored the barricade, ignored every warning she'd already tried to cover with spray paint. Then came a sound I'll never forget. Boom! Not metal bending, not a gate breaking. It was the deep, solid impact of 2,000 pounds of steel anchored in 4 feet of reinforced concrete refusing to move. The SUV stopped instantly. The front end folded like aluminum foil. Steam burst from the hood. Airbags exploded. The horn stuck on. Silence followed. I grabbed my truck keys and raced toward the entrance. By the time I arrived, 2 passing drivers had already called 911. Linda was conscious, shaken, covered in airbag dust. She climbed out screaming before the paramedics even arrived. You trapped me. She pointed directly at me. You built this to destroy my car. I looked at the entrance. The bollards hadn't moved even half an inch. The warning signs were still standing. The reflective paint gleamed in the sunlight. Deputy Mark Ellis arrived first. He walked slowly around the crash scene. Then he looked at the spray-painted warning sign. Then at the untouched bollards. Finally, he turned toward Linda. She interrupted him. Arrest him. Mark ignored her. Did you drive onto private property? I was using the access road. There is no access road. There always has been. Ethan quietly handed him a folder. Inside were copies of the property survey permits, inspection approvals, warning sign installation dates, and still photographs. Then I handed him something even better. A tablet. On the screen was footage from 5 different camera angles. One showed Linda spray, painting the warning sign. Another showed her inspecting the bollards. A third captured her backing up before accelerating straight toward the entrance. No one watching that footage could mistake it for an accident. Mark watched the entire sequence without saying a word. When it ended, he simply looked at Linda. You're going to want an attorney. Her face went pale. But you intentionally entered private property. She tried another angle. He created a hazard. Mark tapped one of the steel bollards. This hazard is entirely on his land. Then he pointed to the reflective markers. And you painted over the warning. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The story exploded across Cedar Ridge before lunch. By evening, everyone had seen pictures of the wrecked SUV. The local newspaper called. Then a regional television station. I declined every interview. Sarah advised me to stay quiet. Let the evidence speak. So I did. 3 days later, I received official notice. Linda was suing me. She wanted payment for her totaled SUV, medical bills, emotional distress, lost wages, and punitive damages. The total exceeded $30,000. I wasn't surprised. Sarah smiled when she read the complaint. They're desperate. I've never been more confident. Really, she slid a thick binder across her desk. Inside were hundreds of pages. Photographs, permits, witness statements, security footage, repair invoices, survey maps, sheriff reports, copies of every certified letter, emails, the wildlife camera logs, even the receipt for the black spray paint recovered from Linda's garage after investigators obtained a warrant related to the vandalism complaint. Sarah closed the binder. What is it? A documentary. The courthouse in Cedar Ridge wasn't large. It seated maybe 80 people. On the morning of trial, every chair was filled. Ranchers, HOA residents, county employees, local reporters, even neighboring attorneys curious about the case. Judge Harold Benson entered exactly at 9. He was known for patience. He was also known for having very little tolerance for dishonesty. Linda entered wearing an expensive neck brace. Sarah leaned toward me. Watch. What, the videos? Linda testified first. She claimed she'd believed the road was public. She claimed the warning sign was unreadable. She claimed the bollards were hidden. She claimed I had deliberately designed a trap. Then Sarah stood. Your Honor, we'd like to play Exhibit 21. The courtroom lights dimmed. The first video appeared. Linda clearly spray painting the warning sign. Gasp echoed through the room. The second video showed her examining the bollards. The third showed her stepping back, measuring the distance with her eyes. The fourth captured her reversing down the county road. The fifth showed the SUV accelerating directly toward the entrance. When the video stopped, the courtroom remained silent. Sarah asked one question. Mrs. Mercer. Linda stared at the floor. No answer. Sarah asked again. No answer. Judge Benson looked over his glasses. Mrs. Mercer, you are under oath. Barely above a whisper, she replied. I did. Sarah nodded. No further questions. Then came the witnesses. Tom Hernandez, the surveyor, confirmed every property line. The county engineer testified the Bollards met every regulation. The inspector verified the permits. Deputy Mark Ellis described the investigation. Richard Owens testified that the OA had never authorized Lynn Shurcut. Then Denise Carter stood. No one expected what happened next. She produced meeting minutes, emails, internal COA correspondence. Several board members had repeatedly instructed Linda to stop using the ranch. She ignored every vote. She even threatened board members who questioned her. The courtroom became absolutely still. Judge Benson spent several minutes reading the documents. Finally, he removed his glasses. Mrs. Mercer, his voice was calm. This court finds overwhelming evidence that your own intentional actions caused the collision. He dismissed every claim against me. Then he looked toward Sarah. Do the defendants have counterclaims? Sarah stood. Yes, Your Honor. Trespass, property damage, vandalism, fence replacement, lost livestock expenses after frightened cattle escaped. Attorney fees were permitted. Punitive damages based on repeated intentional conduct. By the end of the afternoon, judgment had been entered. Linda owed me substantially more than my actual losses because several claims involved willful misconduct under applicable law. She left the courtroom without saying a word. That wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, Silver Creek held an emergency HOA meeting. For the first time, I attended as a guest. The clubhouse overflowed with residents. Richard stepped to the podium. The first order of business, he paused, is the removal of Linda Mercer as HOA president. The vote wasn't close. It was unanimous. Afterward, several residents approached me. One older couple apologized for believing Linda's version of events. A young family thanked me. We always thought you hated the neighborhood. I smiled. I never had a problem with the neighborhood, just Linda. I had a problem with anyone who believed other people's property didn't matter. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. Relationships improved. Families visited the ranch again. Kids fed the horses. I started selling fresh eggs and beef directly to several Silver Creek residents. The same entrance Linda had called embarrassing became something of a local landmark. People stopped to photograph the cedar arch at sunset. One afternoon, Richard stopped by with a gift. It was a carved wooden sign. On it were just 7 words, Guod Fi Es Meka Godan IGH Bars. I laughed. It needs one more thing. What? I pointed toward the steel bollards. They deserve a little credit. Miguel disappeared into the workshop. The next morning, he welded a small bronze plaque onto one of the bollards. It read, Property rights stand firm. Every now and then someone asks why I never removed them. The answer is simple. They're not there because I won. They're there because respect has to be stronger than entitlement. And every sunrise, when I open the ranch gate and see those steel posts standing exactly where they were poured, I remember something my grandfather used to tell me: a gate doesn't just protect land, it protects the people willing to do what's right. He was right, because in the end, it wasn't steel that stopped Linda Mercer. It was the moment the law finally stood as firmly as the ground beneath my family's ranch.